Welcome, curious minds and culture enthusiasts. Today, we're embarking on a fascinating journey into one of the world's most intriguing cultural practices, a ritual that challenges our notions of grief, body, and tradition. We're diving deep into the highlands of Papua, Indonesia, to explore a custom that has captivated anthropologists, shocked outsiders, and defined a community for generations. Imagine a world where the loss of a loved one isn't just felt in your heart, but physically manifested on your body. A place where grief isn't just an internal emotion, but a visible, permanent mark of devotion and remembrance. This is the world of the Dani tribe and their practice of Ikipalin, the ritual finger amputation performed by women to mourn their dead. Now, before you recoil in horror or dismiss this as some primitive custom, let's take a step back. Every culture has its own ways of dealing with death and loss. Some wear black, some build elaborate tombs, and others throw lavish celebrations of life. The Dani's practice might seem extreme to our eyes, but it's deeply rooted in their understanding of family, community, and the spiritual world. In this video, we'll peel back the layers of this complex tradition. We'll explore its origins and cultural significance, delve into the nitty-gritty details of how it's performed, and examine the gender dynamics at play. We'll also look at the spiritual beliefs underpinning the practice and how it connects the Dani to their ancestors. Finally, we'll grapple with the big questions facing the Dani today. How do they balance preserving their unique cultural heritage with the pressures of modernization? So, buckle up for a journey that will challenge your preconceptions, expand your cultural horizons, and maybe even make you reflect on your own traditions and beliefs. Let's dive in. 1. The Dani people. An introduction to Papua's highland tribe. Before we delve into the intricacies of Ikipalin, let's take a moment to get to know the people behind this fascinating practice. Who are the Dani, and where do they call home? Picture, if you will, the island of New Guinea, the second largest island in the world, sitting just north of Australia like a prehistoric bird spreading its wings. The western half of this island is part of Indonesia, known as Papua, formerly Irian Jaya. It's here, in the central highlands of Papua, that we find the homeland of the Dani people. The Dani inhabit the Baliem Valley, a lush, fertile region surrounded by the towering peaks of the Jayawijaya Mountains. This valley, often referred to as Shangri-La by early explorers due to its isolated beauty, sits at an elevation of about 1,600 meters, 5,250 feet, above sea level. It's a land of mist-shrouded mountains, crystal-clear rivers, and dense forests, a natural fortress that kept the Dani isolated from the outside world for millennia. The Dani are not a small group. In fact, they're one of the most populous indigenous groups in Papua, with an estimated population of around 250,000 people. They're often divided into three main subgroups based on their geographic location within the Baliem Valley: the Lower Grand Valley Dani, the Upper Grand Valley Dani, and the Mid Grand Valley Dani. Now, you might be wondering, when did the world first learn about the Dani? Well, that's a story in itself. The Dani remained unknown to the outside world until remarkably recently. It was in 1938 that American zoologist and philanthropist Richard Archbold, on an expedition to study wildlife in New Guinea, quite literally stumbled upon the Baliem Valley and its inhabitants from his airplane. Imagine the mutual shock. Archbold and his team discovering a thriving civilization in what they thought was uninhabited wilderness, and the Dani seeing their first airplane. This first contact would mark the beginning of significant changes for the Dani, but it's crucial to understand that their culture and way of life had been developing for thousands of years before this moment. The Dani are primarily agriculturalists, with a diet centered around sweet potatoes. They practice a form of intensive cultivation that has allowed them to thrive in their mountain valley for generations. Their agricultural expertise is reflected in their complex system of gardens and irrigation, a testament to their deep understanding of their environment. Traditionally, Dani society was organized into clan-based villages, each typically consisting of several round houses with thatched roofs, known as honai. These villages were often in a state of low-level conflict with each other, engaging in ritual warfare that played a significant role in Dani culture and social organization. The Dani are known for their distinctive appearance and cultural practices. Men traditionally wear little clothing apart from a penis gourd, known as a koteka, while women wear skirts made of grass. Both men and women often adorn themselves with intricate headdresses made of feathers, especially for ceremonial occasions. One of the most striking aspects of Dani culture is their elaborate system of rituals and ceremonies. These touch on every aspect of life, from birth to death, from war to peace, from planting to harvest. It's within this rich tapestry of cultural practices that we find Ikipalin, the finger-cutting ritual that has so captivated outside observers. But it's important to remember that Ikipalin is just one thread in the complex weave of Dani culture. To understand it fully, we need to see it in the context of the Dani's broader worldview, their social structure, and their spiritual beliefs. The Dani have a saying, "Ween Hano, Onahano," which roughly translates to, "All people are one." This philosophy of interconnectedness permeates every aspect of their culture, including their mourning practices. As we explore Ikipalin, keep this in mind. What might seem extreme or bizarre to outsiders is, for the Dani, a profound expression of their unity as a people and their connection to their ancestors. In recent decades, the Dani have faced numerous challenges as their once isolated valley has been increasingly exposed to the outside world. Indonesian governance, Christian missionaries, tourism, and the forces of globalization have all left their mark. Yet despite these pressures, many Dani continue to maintain their traditional way of life, adapting their ancient customs to a rapidly changing world. As we delve deeper into the practice of Ikipalin, we'll see how it reflects the Dani's deep-rooted cultural values, their complex social structures, and their ongoing struggle to preserve their identity in the face of modernization. So, let's begin our exploration of this fascinating and controversial ritual, starting with its origins and cultural significance. 2. The origins and cultural significance of Ikipalin. As we delve into the practice of Ikipalin, it's important to understand that this isn't just a ritual, it's a profound expression of Dani culture and worldview. The word, Ikipalin, itself comes from the Dani language, roughly translating to, cut off the fingers. The origins of Ikipalin are shrouded in the mists of time. Like many ancient practices, its exact beginnings are unknown, passed down through generations in oral tradition. Some anthropologists speculate that it may have evolved from earlier blood sacrifice rituals, common in many ancient cultures. Others suggest it might have originated as a way to visibly distinguish the living from the dead during times of high mortality, particularly among infants. What we do know is that Ikipalin is deeply rooted in the Dani philosophy of interconnectedness. Remember that saying we mentioned earlier, Ween Hano, Onahano, or, all people are one. This concept is at the heart of Ikipalin. In Dani culture, fingers are seen as powerful symbols of unity and cooperation. Think about how your own fingers work together. Despite their different sizes and strengths, they collaborate to accomplish tasks. For the Dani, this is a perfect metaphor for their community. Each person, like each finger, has their role to play in the tribe's survival and success. So when a Dani woman cuts off part of her finger after losing a loved one, she's enacting a profound symbol of how the loss has affected the entire community. It's as if she's saying, our tribe has lost a vital part of itself. We are diminished, just as my hand is now diminished. But Ikipalin isn't just about symbolism, it's also believed to serve practical spiritual purposes. The Dani believe that the physical pain of amputation helps to externalize and process the emotional pain of grief. In a way, it's a form of catharsis, a way to make the internal anguish of loss tangible and visible. Moreover, Ikipalin is seen as a way to appease the spirits of the dead. The Dani believe that by offering a piece of themselves, quite literally, they can prevent the spirits of the deceased from causing harm to the living. This is especially important when a powerful member of the tribe dies, as their spirit is thought to be particularly restless and potentially dangerous. The cultural significance of Ikipalin extends beyond the moment of grief. In Dani society, a woman's amputated fingers become a visible record of her life experiences and connections. Each missing fingertip tells a story of loss, yes, but also of resilience, of survival, of a life fully lived and deeply connected to others. It's a bit like how we might view the wrinkles on an elder's face, each line a testament to a life of experiences, both joyful and sorrowful. Interestingly, Ikipalin also plays a role in Dani social structure. The practice creates a shared experience of grief and sacrifice that bonds the community together. It's a visible reminder of their interconnectedness and shared history. However, it's crucial to note that Ikipalin, like many cultural practices around the world, isn't static. Its meaning and prevalence have evolved over time, especially as the Dani have come into increasing contact with the outside world. Some younger Dani have begun to question or reject the practice, while others see it as an important part of their cultural identity. As we move forward in our exploration, keep in mind that Ikipalin isn't just about cutting off fingers. It's a complex practice that reflects deep-seated beliefs about life, death, community, and the spirit world. Understanding these underlying beliefs is key to grasping why this practice, shocking as it might seem to outsiders, has been an integral part of Dani culture for generations. 3. The ritual process. Methods and meaning. Now that we understand the cultural context of Ikipalin, let's explore how this ritual is actually performed. Be warned, some of these details might be disturbing to some viewers, but it's important to approach this with an open mind and remember the deep cultural significance behind these actions. When a death occurs in the Dani community, the women who were close to the deceased, wives, mothers, sisters, daughters, prepare for Ikipalin. The ritual typically takes place during or shortly after the funeral proceedings. The process begins with numbing the finger. A thin rope or string is tied tightly around the upper part of the finger, usually just above the first joint. This is left in place for about 30 minutes. As the blood flow is cut off, the finger becomes numb, serving two purposes. It reduces the pain of amputation and helps control bleeding. Once the finger is numb, the actual amputation begins. Traditionally, this was done with a sharp stone axe or knife. In more recent times, other sharp implements might be used, but the principle remains the same. The top portion of the finger, usually up to the first joint, is swiftly cut off. Now, you might be wincing at the thought, but remember, this isn't a medical procedure in a sterile hospital. It's a deeply spiritual and emotional act performed in the midst of profound grief. Many anthropologists who've witnessed Ikipalin report that the women often seem to be in an almost trance-like state during the amputation, their focus entirely on their loss and the meaning of their sacrifice. After the amputation, the wound is cauterized to stop the bleeding. Traditionally, this was done with a hot stone or piece of metal. The heat not only seals the wound but also helps to prevent infection. Following this, the stump is dressed with a poultice of herbs and leaves known for their healing properties. But what happens to the amputated fingertip? This is where things get really interesting. The severed piece isn't simply discarded. Instead, it's treated with immense reverence. In some cases, it's dried and burned to ashes, which are then buried in a special, sacred place. In other instances, the fingertip might be preserved and kept in the family's dwelling as a kind of memorial to the deceased. The entire process is usually overseen by a female elder of the tribe, someone who has performed or assisted with many Ikipalins in her lifetime. She guides the mourner through the ritual, ensuring it's done correctly and with proper respect. Throughout the ritual, there are prayers, chants, and other ceremonial elements. These aren't just for show, they're an integral part of the process, believed to ensure that the sacrifice is accepted by the spirits and that the mourner's grief is properly expressed and processed. It's natural to wonder about the health implications of such a practice. Infection is certainly a risk, especially in a non-sterile environment. However, the Dani have developed techniques over generations to minimize these risks. The use of medicinal herbs, for instance, isn't just symbolic. Many of these plants have genuine antibacterial properties. As for long-term effects, it's important to remember that Ikipalin typically only removes the top portion of the finger. While this certainly impacts dexterity, it doesn't usually render the hand unusable. In fact, many Dani women with multiple amputations continue to perform all their usual tasks, from weaving to farming to child-rearing. One of the most poignant aspects of Ikipalin is its permanence. Unlike many mourning practices that have a set duration, think of wearing black for a year, for instance, the effects of Ikipalin last a lifetime. Every time a woman looks at her hand or uses it, she's reminded of her loss. But in Dani culture, this isn't seen as a burden. Rather, it's viewed as a testament to love, a badge of honor, and a connection to those who have passed on. In many ways, Ikipalin serves as a physical manifestation of the Dani saying, "I would give anything to have you back." It's a permanent, visible reminder of love and loss, carried on the body for a lifetime. As we consider this practice, it's crucial to approach it not with judgment, but with an attempt at understanding. While it may seem extreme to us, for the Dani, Ikipalin is a profound expression of grief, love, and cultural identity. It's a testament to the incredible diversity of human cultural practices and the many ways we've developed to cope with one of life's universal experiences, the loss of those we love. 4. Gender dynamics and social structure in Dani culture. As we've seen, Ikipalin is primarily practiced by women in Dani society. This raises some intriguing questions about gender roles and social structure within the tribe. To understand this, we need to take a broader look at how Dani society is organized and how gender shapes daily life and cultural practices. The Dani, like many traditional societies, have distinct roles for men and women. Men are typically responsible for hunting, warfare, and major decision-making within the tribe. Women, on the other hand, are the primary caretakers of children, tend to the gardens that provide much of the tribe's food, and are responsible for many domestic tasks. But it would be a mistake to view this division of labor as a simple case of male dominance and female subservience. The reality is much more complex and nuanced. In Dani society, women hold significant power and influence, particularly in the domestic sphere. They're the keepers of much traditional knowledge, especially regarding child rearing, agriculture, and medicinal plants. Women also play crucial roles in many rituals and ceremonies, of which Ikipalin is just one example. So why is Ikipalin primarily a female practice? There are several theories. One perspective is that it relates to the Dani view of women as the primary nurturers and emotional centers of the family. In many cultures around the world, women are often expected to be the main expressors of grief. Think of the tradition of professional mourners in some Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures, who are almost always women. In this light, Ikipalin can be seen as an extreme extension of this role, women literally embodying the family's grief. Another theory links it to the Dani belief in the power of blood sacrifice. In many cultures, women's bodies are associated with cycles of birth, life, and death due to menstruation and childbirth. The blood shed in Ikipalin might be seen as an extension of this, a powerful offering to appease the spirits. There's also a practical aspect to consider. Dani men are expected to be warriors and hunters, roles that require full use of their hands. Amputating fingers could significantly impair their ability to use weapons or tools effectively. Women, while their work is no less important, might be seen as better able to adapt to the loss of fingertips. Interestingly, while Ikipalin is primarily a female practice, it's not exclusively so. Some accounts mention older men participating in the ritual, particularly after the death of a child. However, instead of amputating fingers, men might cut off part of an ear or make cuts on other parts of their body. It's also worth noting that Ikipalin isn't just practiced by adult women. In some cases, mothers would bite off the fingertips of their female infants or young children as part of the mourning process. This practice, which might seem shockingly cruel to outsiders, was seen as a way of protecting the child from future harm by appeasing the spirits early in life. The gender dynamics of Ikipalin reflect broader patterns in Dani social structure. Like many traditional societies, the Dani have a complex system of social obligations and reciprocities. When a person dies, it's not just their immediate family who mourn, the entire community is affected. In this context, Ikipalin serves as a visible, physical manifestation of these social bonds. A woman with multiple amputations carries on her body a record of her connections to others, her losses, and by extension, her place within the community's social fabric. It's also important to note that while Ikipalin is a female-centric practice, its effects ripple out to impact the entire community. The loss of fingers can impact a woman's ability to perform certain tasks, which in turn requires adaptation and support from other community members. In this way, the practice reinforces interdependence and mutual support within the tribe. As we consider these gender dynamics, it's crucial to resist the temptation to impose our own cultural values or judgments. What might seem like a brutal or oppressive practice to us is, within Dani culture, a complex tradition that reflects and reinforces social bonds, spiritual beliefs, and cultural identity. However, it's also important to note that like many aspects of Dani culture, the gender dynamics surrounding Ikipalin are not static. As the tribe has increasing contact with the outside world, traditional gender roles and practices are being questioned and renegotiated, particularly by younger generations. This tension between tradition and modernity is a theme we'll explore more deeply in our final section. 5. Spiritual beliefs and ancestral connections. To truly grasp the significance of Ikipalin, we need to step into the spiritual world of the Dani. Their beliefs about life, death, and the afterlife provide the foundation for this practice and many other aspects of their culture. The Dani, like many indigenous peoples, have a rich and complex spiritual tradition. They believe in a world that's inhabited not just by the living, but also by the spirits of the dead and various supernatural beings. These spirits are thought to have significant influence over the affairs of the living, capable of bringing both blessings and misfortune. In the Dani worldview, death isn't the end of a person's existence. It's a transition to another state of being. The spirits of the dead are believed to linger in the world of the living, particularly in the period immediately following death. This is a crucial time when the living must perform the proper rituals to ensure the spirit's peaceful departure to the afterlife. Ikipalin plays a vital role in this process. The Dani believe that the pain and blood sacrifice of finger amputation serve multiple spiritual purposes. First, it's thought to appease the spirit of the deceased, preventing it from becoming angry or vengeful. The physical pain of the mourner is seen as a kind of offering, demonstrating the depth of their grief and their willingness to suffer on behalf of the departed. Secondly, the practice is believed to create a lasting connection between the living and the dead. The amputated finger becomes a kind of conduit, linking the mourner to their departed loved one. In some cases, the preserved fingertip or its ashes are kept as a physical representation of this ongoing relationship. The Dani also believe that Ikipalin serves a protective function for the living. By making this sacrifice, they hope to ward off further misfortune and death. It's as if they're saying to the spirits, "We've given you this, now leave us in peace." Interestingly, the number of fingers a woman has amputated over her lifetime is seen as a measure of her spiritual power and connection to the ancestor world. A woman who has undergone multiple Ikipalins may be viewed as having special insight or ability to communicate with the spirits. The ancestral connection aspect of Ikipalin is particularly important in understanding its cultural significance. For the Dani, their ancestors aren't distant, forgotten figures, they're an active, present force in daily life. Rituals like Ikipalin serve to reinforce and maintain these connections across generations. This belief in the active presence of ancestral spirits shapes many aspects of Dani life beyond just mourning practices. It influences decisions about farming, hunting, warfare, and social relationships. In essence, the Dani live in a world where the boundary between the physical and spiritual realms is permeable, and where the actions of the living have direct consequences in the spirit world, and vice versa. It's also worth noting that these spiritual beliefs aren't static. Like many aspects of Dani culture, they've been influenced by contact with the outside world, particularly by the arrival of Christian missionaries in the mid-20th century. Some Dani have embraced Christianity, leading to a complex blending of traditional and Christian beliefs. Others have held more firmly to their traditional spiritual practices. This spiritual dimension adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of Ikipalin. What might seem like a simple act of self-mutilation to outside observers is, for the Dani, a deeply meaningful spiritual practice that connects them to their ancestors, protects their community, and helps them navigate the difficult terrain of grief and loss. As we consider these beliefs, it's important to approach them with respect and an open mind. While they may seem foreign or even superstitious to those of us raised in different cultural contexts, for the Dani, these spiritual beliefs are as real and important as any scientific fact is to us. They form the bedrock of their worldview and provide a framework for understanding life, death, and everything in between. In our final section, we'll explore how these traditional practices and beliefs are faring in the face of modernization and outside influences. The story of Ikipalin in the 21st century is one of cultural preservation, adaptation, and change. 6. Cultural preservation versus modernization. The fate of traditional practices. As we've explored the practice of Ikipalin, we've delved deep into the cultural, social, and spiritual world of the Dani. But no culture exists in a vacuum, and the Dani are no exception. In recent decades, they've faced unprecedented challenges as their once isolated valley has been increasingly exposed to the outside world. The story of the Dani in the modern era begins in earnest in the 1960s, when the Indonesian government began to exert more control over Papua. This brought new laws, new religions, and new ways of life to the Baliem Valley. Christian missionaries arrived, bringing not just a new faith but also Western education and medicine. Later came tourists, anthropologists, and the inevitable creep of globalization. These changes have had a profound impact on Dani culture, including the practice of Ikipalin. In 1989, the Indonesian government officially banned the ritual, citing health concerns and human rights issues. While this ban hasn't completely eradicated the practice, it has certainly diminished its prevalence. But the fate of Ikipalin isn't just about government regulations. It's about a culture grappling with rapid change and trying to find its place in the modern world. Many younger Dani, exposed to education and outside influences, have begun to question traditional practices like Ikipalin. Some see it as outdated or even barbaric, preferring to adopt more Western-style mourning practices. On the other hand, there are those within the Dani community who see Ikipalin and other traditional practices as vital to preserving their cultural identity. They argue that abandoning these customs would mean losing an essential part of what makes them Dani. This tension between tradition and modernity plays out in fascinating ways. Some Dani women, for instance, now wear prosthetic fingertips to simulate the appearance of having undergone Ikipalin without actually amputating their fingers. This allows them to honor the tradition symbolically while avoiding the physical act. The debate over Ikipalin is part of a larger conversation happening in indigenous communities around the world. How much of traditional culture should be preserved? How can ancient practices be adapted to fit modern realities? What is lost when a culture changes, and what is gained? These aren't easy questions to answer, and the Dani themselves are divided on the issue. Some argue that practices like Ikipalin are an essential part of their cultural heritage and should be preserved at all costs. Others contend that culture is always evolving and that holding on to practices that no longer serve the community is counterproductive. It's important to note that the decline of Ikipalin doesn't mean the Dani are losing their cultural identity altogether. Many aspects of traditional Dani culture continue to thrive. The annual Baliem Valley Festival, for instance, celebrates Dani culture with traditional dances, mock battles, and displays of craftsmanship. This festival has become a major tourist attraction, allowing the Dani to share their culture with the world while also generating income for their communities. Moreover, many Dani are finding ways to blend traditional practices with modern life. They might use smartphones and wear Western clothes, but still participate in traditional ceremonies and speak their native language. It's a delicate balancing act, but one that many indigenous cultures around the world are managing to navigate. The story of Ikipalin in the 21st century is still being written. While the practice has undoubtedly declined, it hasn't disappeared entirely. There are still Dani women who choose to undergo the ritual, seeing it as an important connection to their ancestors and their cultural identity. As we consider the future of Ikipalin and Dani culture more broadly, it's crucial to remember that cultural change isn't necessarily a bad thing. Cultures have always evolved and adapted to new circumstances. What's important is that these changes are driven by the Dani themselves, rather than being imposed from outside. The challenge for the Dani, as for many indigenous peoples, is to find a way to preserve the core of their cultural identity while also embracing the opportunities and advancements of the modern world. It's a difficult balance, but one that many Dani are working hard to achieve. As we conclude our exploration of Ikipalin, it's worth reflecting on what this practice can teach us about cultural diversity and human resilience. The Dani's finger-cutting ritual might seem shocking or incomprehensible to outsiders, but it's a powerful reminder of the incredible variety of human cultural expression. It also challenges us to examine our own cultural practices and beliefs. What rituals do we perform that might seem strange to others? How do we express grief and maintain connections with our ancestors? By understanding and respecting practices like Ikipalin, we open ourselves up to a richer, more diverse view of what it means to be human. In the end, the story of Ikipalin is more than just a tale of an unusual cultural practice. It's a window into the complex ways that traditional cultures navigate the modern world, balancing preservation and adaptation, honoring the past while looking to the future. As we face global challenges that require cross-cultural understanding and cooperation, these lessons from the Dani become increasingly valuable. Whether Ikipalin continues as a living practice or becomes a historical footnote, its legacy will undoubtedly continue to shape Dani identity for generations to come. And for those of us outside the culture, it will remain a powerful reminder of the depth, complexity, and diversity of human cultural expression. As we conclude our exploration of the Dani people and their practice of Ikipalin, let's take a moment to reflect on the broader implications of what we've learned. First and foremost, the story of Ikipalin reminds us of the incredible diversity of human cultural expression. What might seem shocking or incomprehensible to us can be deeply meaningful and important to others. This underscores the need for cultural relativism, the idea that we should strive to understand and evaluate cultural practices within their own context, rather than judging them by our own standards. Secondly, the evolving fate of Ikipalin in the face of modernization highlights the complex challenges facing indigenous cultures around the world. As globalization continues to shrink our planet, how can traditional cultures preserve their unique identities while also adapting to a changing world? The Dani's struggle with this question mirrors similar dilemmas faced by indigenous peoples from the Amazon to the Arctic. Moreover, the spiritual beliefs underlying Ikipalin offer us a different perspective on life, death, and our connection to our ancestors. In our increasingly secular, individualistic societies, there's perhaps something to be learned from the Dani's view of the world as deeply interconnected, where the actions of the living have direct consequences in the spirit world. Finally, the gender dynamics of Ikipalin prompt us to reflect on how different cultures assign roles and expectations based on gender. While we might instinctively recoil at the idea of women being expected to mutilate themselves in mourning, it's crucial to remember that every culture, including our own, has gendered expectations that might seem strange or unfair to outsiders. As we face global challenges that require cross-cultural understanding and cooperation, the lessons we can learn from studying practices like Ikipalin become increasingly valuable. They teach us to question our assumptions, to seek understanding before judgment, and to recognize the common humanity that underlies even the most seemingly alien cultural practices. We encourage you, our viewers, to continue exploring these themes. How do the mourning practices in your own culture compare to Ikipalin? What traditions do you have that might seem strange to outsiders? How do you balance honoring your cultural heritage with adapting to the modern world? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you found this exploration of Dani culture intriguing, consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the world's fascinating cultures and traditions. Remember, in studying others, we often learn the most about ourselves. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of Dani culture. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving for understanding in our beautifully diverse world.